Andrew Paul Gosden was born on July 10, 1993, in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and lived with his family in Balby, a southwestern suburb of Doncaster with a population of 15,000. His parents, Kevin and Glenys, married in 1990. Their first child, Charlotte, was born a year later, followed by Andrew 2 years after her. Both babies were very calm and slept through the nights after just a few weeks. They learned to read by the age of 2 or 3, and as they grew older, it became clear that they were gifted academically. Both parents worked as speech therapists and were devout Anglican Christians. However, they chose not to baptize their children as they didn't want to impose their views on them. They always made it clear that any decision about faith is a personal one. Despite this, Andrew went through Sunday school, helped his father from a very young age around the church grounds, and often visited the nearby St. James Church, although he hadn't been there for 18 months before he disappeared. "I think he was partly following Charlotte and stopping church," the father said later. He used to be a member of Beavers, Cubs, and Scouts too, but a few months before the events he told his father he decided to quit his pack. Kevin said his son loved going to the camps, but wanted to do something else with the camp time instead of the recurring weekly meetings. The teenager was nicknamed Roo by his family, as he was little and bouncy. He rarely left the house, but never without leaving a note or telling his parents, who described him as a home bird. His primary school teachers often pointed out his cheerful demeanor. In secondary, he attended Macaulay Catholic High School in Cantley, located 4.1 miles east of his home on the other side of the city. Andrew had a 100% attendance record and excelled in his studies. Out of all the subjects, he was the best in math, but he was particularly interested in sciences, history, and philosophy too. He was considered a math genius who won competitions at both national and European levels, while also delving into Nietzsche's philosophy. His room was filled with books, including popular series like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Alex Rider, and the Roman Mysteries. But before the disappearance, he was more inclined to read works by John Grisham and Jeffrey Archer. The 14-year-old also owned a snooker table and was a big fan of the sport, and even went to the Crucible Theater several times with his family to see World Championship matches. He enjoyed watching football too, and often wore Liverpool and Real Madrid jerseys when he was younger. Just like her sister, Andy was selected for the Young Gifted and Talented program, the replacement of the National Academy for Gifted and Talented Youth, which was designed to enhance the educational development of the top 5% of school pupils between the ages of 4 and 19. Andrew had been expected by everyone to score straight A's in his GCSE exams and was regarded as a gifted student who was almost certainly destined for Cambridge University. According to his father, Andrew was the laid-back one who never appeared to worry about anything and was one of those slightly annoying people who seemed to be able to achieve without the slightest effort things that the rest of us find rather hard work. Even though he never missed classes, the boy hardly ever talked about his school life to his parents. He was described as having a neutral attitude, hoping the upcoming school term would provide more of a challenge after having cruised through his education up to that point. He was the sort of person who would listen a great deal but not say much. When he did say something, it was generally worth listening to. He'd obviously thought about it a great deal from several different angles before reaching his conclusion. He seemed to be going through a quiet phase, which we assumed would alter in due course, Kevin shared. However, in the summer of 2006, a year before his disappearance, something changed. Andrew attended a 2-week residential school at Lancaster University in one of the Young Gifted and Talented program's excellence hubs. According to its website, learners aged 4 to 19 from across the UK were able to register for the program, and their applications were assessed by their school. Typically, only the top 5% of children were chosen, so considering Andrew's competencies, it was a brand new environment and experience for him. And not surprisingly, when the boy returned home, he was unusually excited. He tended to say little about school, but we remember him coming back from summer school for gifted and talented kids, and he was absolutely enthused about what he had been doing. To be honest, I think Andrew saw school as something you sort of had to do just in order to have choices open to you for adult life, his father explained, and added that Andrew never really expressed any particular thoughts about future careers. It's worth noting that even though he was introverted, he wasn't a loner. He had a small group of like-minded friends, but according to his parents, they hardly ever met outside school. Gosden's teachers said he was shy, quiet, and mature beyond his years. Others pointed out that despite being 14 years old, he was small for his age and looked about 12. The teenager wasn't a fan of any social media and had not signed up for any websites. He was so disconnected from the online world that after losing the phone he got for his 12th birthday, he didn't even want a new one. He basically used it only to play games, just like the previous ones. And when his parents suggested a replacement, he said he would prefer an Xbox instead. He had a hobby of collecting and polishing rocks and minerals, which was a Sunday afternoon routine he had with Kevin. In his free time, he liked playing video games and enjoyed listening to heavy metal, rock, and their various subgenres. His favorite bands were Evanescence, U2, Coldplay, Slipknot, Iron Maiden, and Muse, and his light blue bedroom was decorated with Marilyn Manson, Funeral for a Friend, Cradle of Filth, and hymn posters on the wall. Kevin even bought him a powerful hi-fi separate system. He saw Muse in concert with his sister and father on Kevin's 40th birthday at Sheffield Arena on November 18, 2006, after the three had watched Casino Royale and had some Italian food together, one of Andrew's favorites. It was his first rock concert, and they all went home with a genuine tour t-shirt. Not long before his disappearance, Andrew was planning on growing his hair long and dyeing it black. This was probably because he wanted to follow his older sister. As they listened to the same bands, they both dived into the goth subculture, and Charlotte previously dyed her hair black. There is no evidence that Andrew was depressed or bullied before the vanishing. The Gosden family lived a normal and balanced life, with the parents occasionally taking their children on foreign vacations to destinations like Malta, Cyprus, Egypt, Tunisia, France, and Greece, and Andrew seemed to enjoy traveling. The 14-year-old was familiar with London too, as some of his family members lived there, and he knew the city's public transport system well. During the summer holidays in 2007, Kevin and Glennis even suggested that he should visit and stay at his grandmother's house for a few days, but he refused as half of his remaining holiday was already booked up. The new school year started on Monday, September 3rd, and according to the parents, on Tuesday, Andrew chose to break his normal routine by walking home instead of taking the school bus. This decision led to a 4-mile walk that took 90 minutes, but Kevin added that this only happened once on a really nice afternoon, so it didn't seem strange. Based on the recollections of the parents, on September 13, 2007, the night before the disappearance, everything went normal, and the evening passed uneventfully. They had dinner together and washed the dishes. This was their talking time. One time when the adults asked the kids if they should get a dishwasher, the siblings said no because they liked helping. After finishing, the boy spent an hour making a computer jigsaw with his father, then watched some comedy programs on television with his mother, such as Mock the Week and That Mitchell and Webb Look. He didn't seem strange, but he was always a quiet, thoughtful boy, Glennis recalled. And this is how we arrive at the day of the disappearance. The next morning, he overslept by 20 minutes and had difficulty waking up, which was highly unusual for him because prior to the disappearance, he was always ready on time. Furthermore, the mother stated her son was particularly irritated that morning. September 14th was Friday, and the boy left his home at 72 Littlemore Lane at 8:05 a.m. Kevin's last words with him took place on the doorstep. "See you later," he said, and his son replied, "See you, Dad." Time passed and slowly everyone arrived back home at around 4 p.m. At 6 p.m., when the Gosdens sat down for dinner with a friend, they were in the belief that their son was either doing homework in his room or playing his favorite football, snooker, or tennis games on his Xbox in the converted cellar. Andrew, however, didn't answer the calls, so Glennis asked Charlotte to check on his brother, but she didn't find him in his room. Afterward, Glennis found the boy's blazer hanging on the back of a chair in his room, so she knew he had come home and changed clothes at some point. The parents initially assumed their son was with a friend or neighbor and lost track of time, so they called his friends, but they learned that Andrew hadn't been to school that day, so at 7 p.m., they decided to call the police and hospitals. As Charlotte recalled, "It was just a complete panic. We initially thought something must have happened on the way to school. When we found that he hadn't even been to school, even tried to go to school, that was even more worrying." She and Kevin scoured the boys' usual route to school, but they found no trace of Andrew. Following this, a missing person flyer was produced, and the family continued the search with the help of friends until nightfall. The investigation was led by Sergeant Ian Honeybone and Detective Helene Hardy from South Yorkshire Police. Due to his age, Andrew Gosden was considered a vulnerable person, so they also searched the neighborhood thoroughly several times, and experts collected his DNA samples from his dressing gown and fingerprints from the posters in his room. Church members made efforts to find the boy as well, and Reverend Alan Murray, vicar of St. James Church and a family friend, informed the parents that he saw Andrew in the nearby Westfield Park on the day of the disappearance. "On the morning Andrew left, I saw him go into the park instead of to the bus stop as usual. I didn't think anything of it, but now it appears he was waiting for his parents to go to work. Now when I walk past the park each day, it all comes back," Reverend Murray said, who was driving past the park that morning. On the third day, a woman claimed she had identified the schoolboy because she had sold him a train ticket to London. She remembered the 14-year-old because it was strange to see someone his age alone during school hours, and he insisted on buying a one-way ticket, even though she told him a return ticket would only cost 50 pence more. In parallel, the family managed to obtain a neighbor's CCTV footage, and the story of Andrew Gosden's final day in Doncaster started to unfold. Based on the last goodbye, the witness account, the blazer found on his chair, and the timestamp on the neighbor's CCTV, the following might have happened. After leaving home at 8:05 a.m., Andrew Gosden walked straight to Westfield Park. That was when the priest saw him, and presumably, he decided to sit on a bench. He waited for a bit and then returned home when he knew the house was empty. He put his uniform shirt and trousers in the washer, hung his blazer and tie up in the back of a chair in his room as he normally would, then changed into a black slipknot t-shirt and black trousers. The teen then picked up his shoulder bag, embellished with various patches of metal bands, his wallet, his keys, and his Sony PSP handheld console, but he didn't take his passport, the charger for the PSP, and warmer clothes. The latter would have been useful later, because on Friday, September 14th, the peak temperature in London was 73.2 degrees Fahrenheit, or 22.8 degrees Celsius, which dropped to a chilly 47.7 degrees Fahrenheit, or 8.7 degrees Celsius in the early hours of Saturday. Most sources claim he left home again at 8:30 a.m., but the timestamp on the neighbor's CCTV at 43 Littlemore Lane shows that he passed the camera at 9:05 a.m., which would mean he somehow managed to do a 1-minute walk in 35 minutes. Another contradiction is that all sources state that the neighbor's camera recorded the teenager returning home from the park in his uniform, but it is simply impossible because Westfield Park is literally in the opposite direction. So if the time was set right on the CCTV, Andrew must have left home a little after 9 a.m., and the security camera recorded him as he was heading towards Doncaster railway station, 0.8 miles north of his home, which is a 17-minute walk at normal speed. On his way, Andy stopped by an ATM at a local garage to withdraw £200, which was almost the whole amount on the account. The remaining £14 was not taken out, as the smallest banknote the machine could give out was £20. What made the situation even stranger was that for some reason, he had left behind his £100 birthday savings in his room. It's unclear why, but maybe because the birthday money had emotional value for him as he received the cash as a gift from his loved ones. Soon after, he arrived at the train station and bought a one-way ticket to London for £31.40. Andrew Gosden then boarded the GNER train to London's King's Cross station, which departed at 9:35 a.m., and a woman sitting next to him recalled that the schoolboy was quiet the whole time and only played on his PSP. By that time, The teachers had already noticed that for the first time, he didn't arrive at school and wanted to inform the parents, but they tried to reach the wrong number, the number of another student's parents, either above or below the Gosdens, so Kevin and Glennis were only informed about the situation when it was already late. After hearing the ticket seller's testimony, the police could confirm that the teenager wanted to travel to the capital. However, 3 days had passed since the disappearance because the employee who sold the ticket on Friday was off over the weekend. The lady was working again on Monday when she saw family and friends putting up posters everywhere, and she remembered that she had sold a ticket to Andrew. At this point, it would have been reasonable to collect all available CCTV footage around King's Cross, but the police did not act immediately. When they did a few days later, South Yorkshire police asked the British Transport Police to analyze the recordings within 2 days of Gosden going missing, but BTP could not pick him out from the crowds. Luckily, the SYP sent a detective to London weeks later to once again watch the videos, and finally they noticed the schoolboy leaving the main concourse at King's Cross at 11:25 a.m., and this was the last confirmed sighting of Andrew Gosden. So the police determined that the boy arrived in London at 11:20 a.m., but it had already been 28 days since he disappeared, and although the number of surveillance cameras in Greater London was around 500,000, most of the recordings were deleted after 3 or 4 weeks, making it basically impossible to find him. Andrew Gosden was last seen wearing a black Slipknot t-shirt, black jeans, trainers, a watch on his left wrist, and carrying a black shoulder bag with patches of rock and metal bands on it. He was described as being 5 feet 3 inches tall, slim, with straight brown hair and brown eyes. He wore strong +8 prescription glasses, was deaf in his left ear, and had trouble locating the direction of sounds, and had a distinctive double ridge on his right ear, which was much like a fingerprint because the pattern will never change. At first, the family had no idea what could have driven him to leave, because his family life was problem-free, and he got everything he ever asked for. He was close to his sister and parents too, who never restricted what he could and couldn't do, within normal limits of course. He didn't have a clear vision of his future career yet, but he was on his way to the best universities in the UK. It was simply inexplicable. Even though Andrew was smart, intelligent, and comfortable around people of all ages, Kevin said that his son sometimes tended to be absent-minded, not streetwise, and potentially vulnerable. The relatives and authorities suspected that he could have met someone over the internet and traveled to London to see this person. But it turned out the boy did not use a computer at home and didn't have an email address either, and the police couldn't find any evidence of Andrew using school or public library computers. In the Gosden house, only Charlotte owned a laptop that was bought for her birthday in the middle of June, 8 weeks before the events. According to the sister, his brother occasionally borrowed the device, but as far as she knew, he wasn't registered on any social media sites because he was simply not interested in them. Kevin also shared that even though his son was a gamer, he didn't register any accounts for his Xbox and PSP. Detectives even went to the Sony headquarters with the unique serial number of the PSP, but they couldn't detect any online activity on the console. The family traveled countless times to the capital and handed out thousands of flyers, especially around the areas of exhibitions and museums where Andrew could possibly go, but unfortunately, their efforts did not yield any results. Kevin said that it wasn't that strange that Andrew bought only a one-way ticket, considering he had friends and family in London. His aunt Linda Gibbons lived in Chislehurst, while his uncle Michael, another aunt Chrissy, and Kevin's parents, Ray and Val Gosden, lived in Sidcup. Therefore, initial searches focused on these areas in addition to Blackheath. The father also speculated that his son might have traveled to London because he wanted to do something for which he felt it was easier to seek forgiveness than ask permission. For instance, it was suggested that he might have wanted to go to a concert, so they looked to see if any of Andrew Gosden's favorite bands were performing at the time. They found some events in similar genres the teenager liked, but there is no evidence that he went to any of them. For example, a 6th concert took place at the former Carling Academy in Islington, just 1 mile east of King's Cross, and the concert was said to be the last with the original vocalist, Mikey Goodman. But this is only a theory, as there is no evidence that he actually liked this band or the others who performed in London that day. The next was again proposed by his father. Kevin revealed that the boy's favorite TV show was The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, a sitcom in which the main character fakes his death to start a new life. It is indeed a weird coincidence, and he was wondering if this could have inspired the 14-year-old. Glennis commented 7 months after the disappearance that, "Our only thought is the Reggie Perrin theory, that like one of his favorite comic characters, he just wanted to step out of conventional life. He'd just seen his sister get A-stars in her GCSEs, and even though he's just as bright, he's very gifted mathematically. Maybe he wanted to step off the treadmill." In 2009, Kevin said, "Did he decide to do the Reginald Perrin thing and reinvent himself? Or was there something troubling him that he felt he couldn't tell us? In my heart, I still think his disappearance was a spur-of-the-moment thing." In the first year, 122 possible sightings had been reported across Britain, including 45 from London, 11 from Brighton, a park in Streatham, Birkenhead, Plymouth, a South End pub, and the National History Museum too. 3 days after Gosden went missing, on Monday, September 17th, a woman at the Oxford Street Pizza Hut and another witness claimed to see Andrew at Covent Garden, but unfortunately, authorities did not follow up on these leads, or not immediately. According to Kevin, the CCTV in Pizza Hut wasn't working at the time, but a waitress could describe the boy's clothing, general appearance, and demeanor. She said he was polite and quiet, ordered a ham and pineapple around lunchtime, sat quietly just by himself, ate his pizza, and left. Regarding Covent Garden, the father shared that the boy liked the atmosphere when they had been there before, and the woman said she spoke to a teenager and stated that he looked like the missing boy she had seen on TV, but he denied being Andrew. She could also describe his appearance and said it was a random encounter and they had a polite conversation. Yet the father added the woman wasn't interviewed until 6 weeks after the disappearance. The family thinks the Pizza Hut sighting is the most credible, as the restaurant was just about 2.6 miles from King's Cross, and the teenager's description perfectly matched Andrew's. Another theory was that the teen might have traveled to the capital to attend the YouTube Gathering 2007 at Leicester Square that weekend. This was backed by a few photographs that were taken at the event, and a young man resembling Andrew was spotted in the crowd, although there is no evidence that he had any interest in YouTube, as he wasn't into the online world in general. On September 17th, additional sightings of him were reported on Oxford Street, and the following day, a boy who looked like him was spotted sleeping on a bench in a park in Southwark. On the morning of September 19th, a similar-looking teenager was seen exiting a local train in the Waterloo area, and again the next day, walking in East Sheen, up Sheen Lane, and along Upper Richmond Road after getting off another train at Mortlake Station, but this time wearing warmer clothes. It appears that in the first days of his disappearance, he opted to live some kind of homeless, wandering life. The next year did not bring much progress, but on the first anniversary of Gosden's vanishing, Mary Lawrence, the head teacher at Macaulay Catholic High School, went to London with staff members and students to hand out 15,000 leaflets. In November 2008, one evening a man walked into the Leominster police station in Herefordshire, West Midlands, about 150 miles southwest of Doncaster, and informed the officer on duty via the intercom that he had information about Andrew Gosden. However, by the time the officer went down to listen to the details, the unknown man had vanished into the night. The authorities issued an appeal hoping the mysterious man would come forward, and later that month, a person who claimed to have been the one at the police station sent a letter to the BBC after the channel featured the case. He claimed that he saw the boy in Shrewsbury, about 42 miles north of Leominster, but investigators could not confirm the story or tell if it was the same man who went into the police station. Unfortunately, despite the extensive efforts made by the police and family, no traces of Andrew Gosden were found. The family, especially the father, claimed that police focused on them in the early stages of the investigation and failed to request recordings of the buses and metro lines. He said that even though detectives could confirm that Andrew traveled to London alone, they still suspected his involvement in his son's disappearance. The parents also considered the possibility that their son may have had sexual motives, such as being homosexual, and not feeling comfortable sharing this with them. The father sought help from the British gay community, and they were very cooperative, but no progress was made. As Kevin stated later, "We are a pretty open family, so I've wondered if he was gay or struggling with his sexual identity and found it too awkward to raise. If he is gay, we do not have any issue with it. He is loved unconditionally by both my wife and I and his sister." He also said, though, that he remembers Andrew once mentioning that he liked a girl at school, but he was too embarrassed to initiate. Throughout the years, several age-progressed images were released to the public, starting in September 2009, when Andrew would have been 16 years old. In May 2011, cutting-edge sonar scanning technology, provided by the Yeovil-based company Liquivision, was used to search the Thames from the Woolwich Barrier to Tower Bridge for Andrew Gosden. Experts used a Starfish 990F 1.1 MHz side sonar scanner, the first to be specifically developed to enable sufficient resolution to identify bodies. Although the scan revealed the wreckage of a sunken boat and an overturned car, no human remains were found. Worth noting that I came across various sources stating that the scan actually revealed a body, but that was not Andrew's. In April 2012, Barry Ford, a businessman from Kent, offered his Porsche as a reward to anyone who could help find Andrew. In the very earliest stages, I had hoped a reward scheme would assist, and to put a slight twist on this, I have decided to offer my car as an incentive free of charge to anyone who can offer Kevin and Glenn information which will determine Andrew's location, he said. On September 2nd, 2017, the police issued another appeal to the public for information because due to the nature of the disappearance, the boy may be still alive today. Authorities checked John Doe's in hospitals and once again began to circulate Andrew's DNA, fingerprints, dental, and health records, while they investigated requests for similar optical prescriptions to Gosden's and asked for documents from the passport office and national insurance, but everything seemed to be a dead end. Since then, the most interesting development occurred in June 2018, when the family reported that a man had informed them about an online conversation with a person with the username Andy Rue. As I mentioned earlier, this was the nickname of the missing boy, and the informant claimed that Andy Rue had told him that their boyfriend had left them and that they needed £200 to pay the rent. It's not clear why he spoke in plural, as most sources cite it, but when the contact offered to send them money, Andy Rue claimed they didn't have a bank account because they had left home when they were 14, because, quote, he just felt like it. The man also added that the mysterious user was listed as living in the Lincoln area and working in a shop. The parents met with the informant and had a meal together, and after the discussion, they considered the witness account very plausible. The police followed up on this lead, but could not find Andrew. They reached out to the web administrators and asked the family to keep this to themselves, but unfortunately, the website had just changed its systems from using Java to something else and lost a significant amount of data, so they couldn't provide any user information. Kevin said they tried hard to do something with this because, for example, the boy's nickname was unique and no one outside the family knew it, but the location tracking didn't necessarily mean that the user lived in the Lincoln area, only that he could have been there at some point. The family searched the area numerous times and distributed 5,000 leaflets with the help of volunteers. As a result, 4 possible sightings were received, but none of them turned out to be their missing son. The latest generated image of the boy and his possible appearance was published in October 2019, but to this date, there is no trace of him. His Santander bank account hasn't been used since September 14, 2007, and his credit card expired long ago. The parents transferred £100 there for emergency, which is enough for another ticket and food, but not to leave the country. The bank account has been flagged too, so if anyone tried to access it, the police would be immediately alerted. On January 11, 2022, South Yorkshire Police announced that on December 8, 2021, following an anonymous tip, 2 London men, aged 38 and 45, were arrested. The 45-year-old man was apprehended on suspicion of kidnapping, human trafficking, and the possession of indecent images of children, and the 38-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and human trafficking. They were the first arrests in connection to the case, and some of their devices had been seized for further examination. But in September 2023, both of them were released without any charges. Detective Chief Inspector Andy Knowles, who has been overseeing the investigation since 2017, said, "We're confident the 2 men arrested played no part in Andrew's disappearance and have been eliminated from our inquiries. However, the investigation remains open and active, and we would urge anyone with information to come forward. It's now been 16 years since Andrew's disappearance, and we know in that time, people's views, opinions, and loyalties can change. Even the smallest piece of information could help detectives find answers for Andrew's family, who have campaigned tirelessly for answers. It might be worth investigating the summer camp and the people the boy met there. On a psychological level, the important question is that what kind of offer or decision could override parental authority and security, because something must have happened to make him leave everything behind without a word. Presumably, he left because he either believed or was led to believe that he would be better off in that other place. Although all of this is just speculation, but for example, a charismatic and equally manipulative person can be able to steer others away from their normal lives. He could have been groomed online by someone who offered him a ride back to Doncaster. This could explain why he didn't bring the PSP charger and warmer clothes with him, and also refused to buy a return ticket. In this case, the reason for leaving home and the actual disappearance are not necessarily connected. At the same time, the sightings days later contradict this, as he was alone each time. But whatever the truth is, it appears that the introverted Doncaster teenager struggled to find his place since school wasn't a challenge for him, and besides his sister, he didn't really have close friends and preferred to live in his own world. As I told you earlier, he had been reading Nietzsche, and he was particularly invested in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and Beyond Good and Evil. Based on this, his mother later wondered if Andy liked the Nietzschean idea of being the Superman and in charge of his own destiny, without guilt or remorse. Ever since he disappeared, they left his room untouched. In the first few months after Andrew's disappearance, Kevin and Glenys visited London many times, postering, leafleting, covering museums, stations, pizza restaurants, all the homeless shelters they could find, anywhere they could think of, and they even launched email campaigns. In November 2008, Andrew became featured in a new nationwide milk carton campaign organized by the Missing People charity and the Iceland supermarket. According to their statement, they were previously involved in a partnership between 1997 to 2006, where more than 130 appeals were made on a limited number of milk cartons, and 40 of those featured were found. Since November 2023, the boy has also been featured among missing person appeals in the Trainline app. Since 2007, many photographs that were taken around the date he vanished have circulated on the internet, with all of them featuring a figure that resembles Andrew Gosden. London had a population of 7.6 million in 2007, and according to the Office for National Statistics, the British capital was the #1 city destination in the world for international travel, with 26.2 million visitors that year. Based on these numbers alone, there is a possibility that Andrew, who enjoyed exhibitions, museums, and historical attractions, might have been captured in a few places, and these images may still be stored on old hard drives waiting to be discovered. His case continues to be a hot topic on the related subreddit, where users frequently discuss their theories and the previously mentioned photographs. I highly recommend checking the forum. It is important to note that none of the images are confirmed sightings of the missing schoolboy, who would be 31 years old at the time of editing this documentary. I also scrolled through the posts, and some of them were even debunked as being taken earlier than our events. In the years since Andrew vanished, Kevin Gosden has had a breakdown, and once after a police interview, he attempted suicide. As the father said, the initial response from the police was severely lacking. Ultimately, my breakdown was caused by the fact that, whilst failing to request relevant CCTV footage and to follow up possible sightings of Andrew within an effective time frame, they preferred to carry out unlawfully recorded interviews aimed at pressurizing me into revealing murder, abuse, anything to explain his disappearance. He even claimed that there was a 2 or 3 year period during which the police carried out stop and search procedures on our car throughout the UK, citing offenses I had never committed as the reason for the stop. Because I am male, they were more heavy-handed with me. They proceeded with extremely stressful interviews, in which I was subjected to the good cop, bad cop routine for some hours. I was accused of every kind of neglect and abuse, including murder. Kevin only narrowly survived after being found by Reverend Murray and rushed to the emergency room. He spent 15 weeks in an acute psychiatric hospital. I was coming round with a dinner when Kevin was trying to hang himself. I heard a crash, ran home and got the key I hold for them. My 10-year-old daughter was outside on the doorstep, the vicar recalled. He was a speech and language therapist in the NHS at the time of the disappearance, working with people suffering from neurodegenerative diseases and traumatic brain injuries. But due to the mental health crisis, he had to resign from his job in 2008. After this, Glennis, who was working with special needs children, became the only breadwinner in the household. In an interview in 2020, he said he received some benefits and is able to work part-time cleaning the church he attends. Charlotte worked as a financial dealer at Leeds Building Society after dropping out of Oxford University's Balliol College following the stress of her brother's disappearance. She married her husband Joseph in 2016, and the couple welcomed their son Marco in 2019. As Kevin recalled, it was just so normal in our house, in our family, until he vanished. You go over and over in your mind all the possibilities that might exist for why he might have chosen to disappear, and we can't come up with anything at all. On July 10th, 2023, on the 30th birthday of Andrew, and almost 16 years after the vanishing, the father again spoke of his ongoing struggle to process his son's disappearance. I have struggled with crippling anxiety and depression, to the extent that it is barely possible to function. No matter how many years pass by without him, those feelings never change and are often intensified by seemingly small things that would not have been a problem before he vanished. After all the searching, appealing, praying, and hoping, we all still miss him intensely every single day. It never seems to become easier. I will never stop looking for my boy. He's my son, and I miss him. If not knowing anything about their son wasn't already enough, sometimes unknown individuals claiming to be Andrew contact the parents and ask for money. The latest news about Kevin came on February 2nd, 2024, when he was working on a community garden project at Jackdaw Wood in Scawthorpe, and thieves stole his bag containing tools, new woodworking equipment, and gifts from Glennis. He had been volunteering for years by then, and had created woodland decorations like totem poles and a family of dragons inspired by children's fairy tales. After the incident, locals launched a fundraising campaign to show how much they appreciated Kevin's work, and luckily they succeeded. The parents have not changed the locks of the house, as they know that the boy took his keys that morning, and maybe he will come back home one day. Andrew Gosden vanished 4 months after Madeleine McCann was kidnapped in Portugal, and his disappearance remains one of the UK's major unsolved missing person cases.